listening to Bruno Mars and Robe. This is a drinking game in Korea. But Donald Trump, he could have just stayed a builder and used all the information and everything and built his building company and hotel company internationally. He didn't have to run for president again. So he could have just been focusing on that aspect. He could have been a consultant for the federal government in construction projects and other things, like he's doing with Elon Musk, special consultant. They did that with Kirk Kerkorian before as well. So, and Warren Buffett was a special consultant to Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was governor of California. Truly, Warren Buffett was a special consultant to Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor of California. So Arnold would run off of all these financial scenarios off of Warren, and Warren would consult. Arnold was a Republican, hardcore Republican. He married a Democrat, the Kennedys, but Warren Buffett is a Democrat. And he consulted with Arnold, who's a Republican, to structure the financial concerns of California. So Arnold could run for senator if he wants to be a senator or a congressman in the House. So, I mean, if he wants to go that way, I mean, he has the experience as governor of California, or he can go into the state Congress if he wants in California. Truly, or he can do what Sonny Bono did. I forget what town Sonny Bono was the mayor of. He left singing, and he just went to be a mayor of a town in Sonny was awesome. And everything I read, he was a great mayor for that town in California. And he didn't miss the music industry. And he loved being mayor, and he died in a skiing accident. But he loved being mayor. So he was, in everything I read, he did a great job as being mayor. Jerry Steinfeld was the mayor of Cincinnati, and he left being a mayor, and he went into the television show reverse. He went from being a mayor to a television TV show host. He had credentials in public speaking and everything. He was a mayor. He did a lot of campaigning and everything else. So if you're in politics, you can go into, like Bill Clinton did and many others, public speaking, like Obama, or you can go in and create a game show or something else. Truly, like Jerry Springer created a TV show. And you can create a TV show or a game show. Since you already have all the ability for running for politics, you have all the public speaking and you know all the ins and outs, you can be, again. So politicians have exit strategies where they can use that experience in politics for many other things. Mayor Daley was a consultant after he left the mayor of Chicago. He became a consultant for the University of Chicago. They hired him as an independent consultant, the University of Chicago, Mayor Daley. So, again, you can go into consulting. You understand how things run. You're not in the bidding process, so you're not soliciting the government. He wasn't soliciting the government. He was consulting them on projects on how to interact better with the city. And he didn't solicit, from my understanding, he didn't solicit anyone. Didn't interact with any government officials. He worked directly with the University of Chicago, and he helped them structure packages that would be appropriate for politicians and other things they wanted to accomplish. But those people interacted with the politicians. He didn't have. He had a arm's length transaction. So he wasn't soliciting the government. He was helping them understand the government, put together the packages for the government, and submit them to the government. That's it. So he wouldn't violate any of Trump's rules. You can't solicit the government for 5 years or whatever. Who cares? Become a consultant. Tell them what to do and who's this and that, and you give them summaries and how to submit things on an international or domestic basis, and they put together the package, they present the deal, you coach them and everything with it, and it's an arm's length transaction. So you're not soliciting the government. You have nothing to do with it. So you're not violating the rule of non-solicitation. Truly, like the head of Mobile, he became the Secretary of State. He can't solicit the government for 5 years. Big deal. But he can consult on how the State Department works, and it was good for him doing things internationally, so he can consult to Mobile on all the people he met and say, okay, these packages for these governments, and this is how we position ourselves, and so on. And he consults, and they go there, and they do the deal and everything else. And all he's doing is giving them consultation. That's what consulting is. But he has nothing to do with the actual pitch. He's not there in the pitch. He has nothing to do. He's not calling people. Truly, he's not calling people. He's not pulling strings. He's giving you a summary. If you said, oh, I want to know how Trump deals with this on construction, and you've dealt with Trump and bidding on jobs, and how should I position myself in the bidding? And they'd be like, okay, let's do a mock pitch. Truly, a mock pitch. And I'll tell you exactly what I think you should do, and I'll be Donald Trump, and I'll be the other side of it. Just like they do mock debates, do a mock sales pitch with them, and you're consulting and training them. And this is how I think they would respond. You know the person, and so you play that role, and they're trying to pitch you, and you're giving counters to their pitch, and they're trying to win you in a sales process. So you do that, and you're coaching, and you're not violating anything. You're an arm's length transaction. All you're doing is consulting. That's why I got into consulting. To be a consultant. Truly, I wasn't consulting. Me and David used to talk all about it. We consulted to businesses. And part of it, yeah, we tell them how to invest and we structure things for them. But it was consulting. So here's the Chicago lakefront. And at night, so they can put, I don't know, make it more friendly at night. Like they don't have any planter boxes or flowers along that. It's one big cement slab. How about some greenery? Some planter boxes or other things. Truly, making it more scenic instead of just a concrete jungle. So up here, you get into more scenery and everything, but they don't have any winter vegetation. Truly, evergreen trees. Do you see any evergreen trees? I don't see any evergreen trees. Evergreen trees are here, one of the trees that, grow here. But I see no evergreen trees, and these are things that take in carbon dioxide during the winter and put out oxygen. All these trees are basically surviving, but they're respirating very little. Truly, they're breathing very little. And so they don't have any form of winter vegetation. And during the summer, the winter vegetation isn't as active with the heat. It closes down to protect itself. But again, you have a blending of summer vegetation, spring, fall. It's spring, summer, and fall. And then you have winter vegetation, late fall, winter, and early spring. So you cover all 6 months. So you hedge yourself. 50% of this, 50% of that. So you get a nice, steady, even consumption and production. Import-export. It imports carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, and it exports oxygen. Truly, as you're looking at. So it's an import-export business. So truly, it's commodities. They're taking one commodity and giving back another. Balance of trade. So, but they don't have any balance of trade here. So it's instability in the atmosphere. Truly. You have more oxygen deprived during the winter because you don't have vegetation that produces a lot of oxygen. So you get more oxygen deprived. Truly. Oxygen deprived because you have no winter vegetation. So I don't understand why they wouldn't change things. And I guess this is a longer video than I wanted, so it's going to be on YouTube. But again, here's the Lincoln Park. It's the zoo. And what do the animals do? I mean, going to the zoo in the winter can be a great time. But what are the animals? Like the tigers from Africa and that, they don't really experience really cold weather. And they're not genetically designed to experience really cold weather. So you have to have a big indoor sanctuary for them during the winter. Truly. Outside, not their environment. So they have to understand that when they bring the animals in, they have to understand where they came from and replicate their environment. And that means both spring, summer, fall, and winter. And so those cats, it's not like there are ones that live in the Arctic and I think Arctic or anyways, there are cold weather lions or tigers. I forget which ones are the cold weather. Just like the polar bear. The grizzly bear lives in colder climates. The polar bear lives in the coldest of climates. And the polar bear is huge. You see a polar bear next to a grizzly bear, a polar bear is way bigger than a grizzly bear. Way bigger. Now, the grizzly bear, it has claws that the polar bear doesn't. It has long claws that are sharp as hell. So those claws are meant to tear you apart and puncture you. So their claws are deadly on the grizzly bear. The polar bear doesn't have the same type of claws that a grizzly bear does. So they go about things a little bit differently, but the polar bear is much bigger. But anyways, the whole point is understanding their environments and why they have what and making sure that they're appropriate at Lincoln Park and Brookfield Zoo. It's just like the Shed Aquarium. When they take it in, not every fish can go into the same tank because the water temperature in that changes and you have to mimic their environment where they came from if you want them to be healthy. So you have to have things broken down by environments. And so, no, the water temperature and salinity is not going to be all the same. You can't dump them in because they can't breathe correctly. Truly, they can't breathe. They can't process things correctly. And it's very unhealthy. So they get these aquatic and then they dump them into this general tank. And that's not how it works. You have to put them back into their environment. So, and that's the big thing about keeping things in their appropriate environment. And that's how you call keeping a healthy ecosystem. That's how things flourish. So we have to think about that with immigration and that. And how do we create healthy ecosystems? Because we've had all this unrest and other countries have to think about it as well. How do you create healthy ecosystems? Even tourism, whether it's educational tourism, social tourism, or business tourism and that, you're creating an ecosystem. And you want to create these healthy ecosystems. So you want certain tourists to go to New York, but other tourists to go to LA, or other tourists to come to Chicago. So you want to create this healthy ecosystem. They want to see the United States, but they don't have to see all of the United States. So you can create these healthy ecosystems. And you have certain tourists going to certain things when you're, setting up the packages and that and bringing them in, like trade shows. Certain trade shows come to Chicago. Certain trade shows go to New York, Vegas, and so on and so forth. So you've got to understand, are they right for the ecosystem that you have here? So when you bring them in, it's destined for success. But if you try to take a square peg and stuff it in a round hole, you're going to have a lot of problems. And then you're going to have a lot of retention problems. So you have to set up things so things work. So in one way, you're competing. In another way, you're working together. And that's what the states do. And within the state, there's the counties. And within the counties, there's the local government. So in one way, you're competing. In another way, you're working together. And you have to figure out this harmony. And it does change. The balance changes. Some areas you weren't competing in and working together. And then that changes. And now you're competing. And now you're working together in other areas that you were competing. So it's not stagnant, it's dynamic. And you have to understand what's happening and how the trend is changing. And doing this, you can create balance and harmony all the time. Because you can mix and match things. And so, again, you can create this good dynamics. So it's like our paramedics in that. How many people that we have? 70, 60, 50, 40 in the city, because more than likely these medical emergencies. So where you have older people, you're more likely to get medical emergencies. Where you have a bunch of younger people, you're less likely to get medical emergencies, except if they're doing some kind of sport that puts them at risk. Truly. So you got to understand, do we have skateboard parks and so on and so forth? And so you understand that we have kids and how many kids participate in this and so on. And do they wear safety equipment or do they not wear safety equipment? So you figure out the probabilities so you know what type of staffing you need for a particular area. One area, you might not need as many fire trucks. You might need, instead of a firehouse having one paramedic, it might be 3 paramedic vehicles, no fire trucks. Building safety, suppression systems are high, and slow burning buildings, so the fire trucks can come from a great distance. But lots of older people, you need 3 sets of paramedic units in the firehouse. No pumper truck, no ladder. That's in another facility where there's more vulnerability. So you can reposition things correctly. So, like I said, some firehouses will only have paramedics. Other firehouses might only have firefighters. Truly, no paramedics, just firefighters. So they don't have any ambulance. They have the hook and ladder and the pumper trucks and so on. And just pure firefighters. But that's not what they do. What do? They put a fire station, they give a ladder and a pumper truck and a paramedic, and that doesn't work. Truly, it doesn't work. And you have to adapt and change. If the demographics change, then you might have had 3 paramedic vehicles, you go down to 2 and you bring in, say, a pumper truck. Truly. Or maybe you bring in a hook and ladder, and you're down to 2 paramedic vehicles. Because of the dynamics change in that area. The buildings change and the people live in that area change, the demographics, and so the risks change, and so you need to reposition the firehouse. Truly, some firehouse can have much older firefighters because the likelihood you don't have any high rises, like going out by Peterson and that. You have all these low rises and so on, and then less likely to start fires, and the fires are less challenging. So you can have older firefighters, because even if they get in a fire, the fire is not going to be that demanding. The houses have good spacing and so on. They're not clustered in. In other areas, the houses are stacked on top of each other, and it makes the fire very challenging to fight. And so you need younger firefighters. Truly, you need an experienced leader, but you need better grunt people. Other places, you can have more senior firefighters because the houses are farther apart and so less challenging. They made up of certain materials and so on, so it's easier for them to deal with. So you put the younger firefighters there, the middle-aged firefighters there, the older firefighters, and some stations will have a little bit of both, right? Younger, middle-aged, and older, and so you get the chemistry right depending on the demand of the area. It's the same thing with the police. You know, older people, like you have a 60-year-old police officer, even if he's in shape, it's better for a 20-year-old to do the foot chase. So, in an area where you're going to have more foot chases, you're going to put more younger cops. And so they're going to be able to handle the foot chases and so on, and they're going to be handled. Their bone structure is denser, their muscles are denser, so they can take the knife wound or the bullet wound better. But the older officer can't take it as well. So if they get injured, it's going to cause more traumatic stress. So you're like, okay, well, we need this, but we need a seasoned veteran, but the young people go in first. The older person is given guidance. They're behind the scenes, truly behind them. Other times in other areas where you have older populations and that, you have older police officers and so on. And yeah, you might get a younger guy in that, but again, they'll handle these one-off situations. But most of the time, they'll be dealing with older adults, truly. And so you'll have more older seasoned cops that deal with the adults better. So it's like Michigan Avenue. It doesn't stay stagnant. Depending on what events are going on and what's going in, working with the airlines, the city of Chicago needs to know the demographics coming in, the visitors. And what do? They have to give IDs. And with the IDs, you get where they live. Truly, you get their age, their height, their weight, all this demographic information. And you're not doing it to profile them in that way. You're using it, and you're not identifying an individual unless they're a bad person. You're doing it to see what type of police you need in the area based on the event. Do we need younger police because we're going to get a lot of people for the FIFA event, and there's going to be a lot of under 30 people coming? And so they might get drunk, and they might be, more physically demanding. And so, yeah, we need a lot of under 30 cops meeting force with force, right? But you have commanders that have skill, but you need people that can do more of the grunt work. But now we're going to have the American Medical Association's coming in for a big conference at McCormick Place, and most doctors are in their 40s and 50s, say. So there are going to be a lot of 40, 50, 60-year-olds, and we need a lot of older cops. We don't need the young cops. And if anything gets out of control, that'll be, 40, 50-year-olds dealing with 40, 50, 60-year-olds. So, and they see people, you meet them peer-to-peer, right? Eye to eye, peer-to-peer. And they get along with them. They can shoot the shit. Like if they say, yeah, did you see that 85 Bears game? The Super Bowl? And they're like 20, like, no. But somebody like me, yeah, I saw that 85 Bears game. That was a hell of a game. Walter Payton should have got his touchdown. They never gave him the ball. They gave it to Fridge, and it was great. He scored, but they had multiple touchdowns. They should have tried to get Walter his touchdown. So he scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. He never got his touchdown. So, anyways, but you can socialize. So when they go out, they can make a thing, and they can handle it by being friendly and warm. And I know we got this situation here, and you're upset, and I can understand, back in our day, these kids, and we did it differently, and these kids today, they're just different. And I understand where you're coming from. And to me, that would really upset me too. So I know where you're coming from. Let's, kind of move forward and see how we can deal with this issue. But when you're talking peer-to-peer, it's easy to have these conversations. And Jen, my ex, was an old soul. Truly. So she was very schooled. So it was easy to have conversations because she knew a lot about history and everything, and it was easy to talk to her. But if you get with another girl and say you're an older guy and they're like, yeah, I'm doing that, and that's why it didn't work with Hugh Hefner. Because, yeah, you can get a young girl, but you need an older soul. Not a young girl that, like, who the hell is Groucho Marx? But, oh, yeah, I used to watch Groucho Marx and so on and so forth. I know the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges because they're an old soul. They like the classics and that. Truly, Jen liked the classics. She would know these old things, and it made it easy for conversation. And this is why it goes bad on dating sites and that. They're like, well, yeah, I want the... But they don't match up outside of that. And so you got to find the old soul that likes the classics and likes these things. And they're like, oh, wow, love wine and you love the old, and we can go to wine tastings, we can do this and that. And you're an older man and it's a younger woman, but you have a lot in common. Truly. So all younger people don't do the same things. So Jen used to sit in the piano bar. Truly, at the Best Western, sitting in a piano bar. She didn't go to the clubs. It was a fluke I met her at the club. It was her friend. It was Peter that went to the clubs, and his girlfriend, who was in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, who was Asian as well. And they went out to the clubs. Peter wanted to take them out. Even his girlfriend, she didn't go out. I didn't see her at the clubs, but she used to live above on Rush on the second story. And she played in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Great girl. But Peter went out to the clubs. She would let Peter go out to the clubs, and they would go out to dinner and do other things. But this night, she went to the club with him. And with him, because they were taking Jen out. And so I think they went to the show at the Chicago Symphony, and after the show, she played in it. And then they went to the clubs, and that's when I met Jen. But she was an older soul. She was more of a student of history. So it was easy to make the dynamics. So you have to find people like that if you're in a mismatch in age, and that's why Austin Kutcher and Demi Moore didn't work in the long term. Truly, didn't work. Austin's not an old soul. So he's with Mila, and it's truly. And I fault him how he handled the situation. Truly, he didn't support her, he didn't work with her, didn't help her. Demi never treated him wrong. And he should have been more mature about how he handled everything. But he didn't handle it correctly, in my opinion. But Demi got into a relationship. She needed an old soul. He wasn't it. So if you're going to be a female cougar, then you need somebody that pairs up with you that understands this history and has this and respects the ways of the old, right? So they understand how the culture was and how you grew up and everything, and you don't run into conflicts. And you have a lot to do, you have a lot to talk about. But if you don't do that, then you get in like it's a one-sided relationship, meaning there's only one aspect that's very good. And then the other aspects, it's like, I want to pull out my freaking teeth. But that one aspect might be very important, but you can find somebody that has that one aspect and also pairs up with you in many other areas. So if you're a beer drinker, they don't ask this on dating sites. Are you a beer drinker? Are you a wine drinker? Are you a coffee? Do you love tea? Truly, do you love Chinese food? Do you love Serbian food? Do you like to stay at home? Do you like to travel? If you like to travel, is more Europe your thing? Or do you like to go down to Cancun and Latin America? Truly, people go to different regions. Like Carol and Sylvia, they worked in Latin America. Carol went to Spain for grad school. And so they like that culture. They like that aspect. So they're very good with Spanish people. Truly, they're both very good with Latin people. They're both, one's Chinese, the other's Korean, but they like the Latin culture. So, again, you have to understand. So they could date a Latino. If they're dating outside their Chinese or outside of Korean, they would want somebody that maybe a Latino, or truly an Argentinian's a white person. If you're saying you want white and not more Native American, truly the darker skin, the more native they are, the lighter skin, the more European, and they fall in. But it depends on how they're brought up. Truly, the culture they're brought up into. And all you're doing is trying to figure out this match. Like, do you listen to rap music? Truly. And if you do, are you a Run DMC guy? Or are you, whatever? Do you know this? And you grow up there, and you kind of grow up back in the day, and you can romance. Even if they're a younger person, they're into old school rap. Or maybe they love jazz or blues. Truly. And if they don't and you like it, you ask them. Like Jen. She said, what do you like to talk about? Finance. She said, that's fine. We can talk about finance, and I'll learn from you. I'll be quiet. You talk about finance, and I'll take it serious, and I'll learn from you. So we could talk about finance. I talked about deferred comp. I took her to some meetings and so on and so forth. And then she said, where do you like to go? And I said, I like to go to movies. She said, I don't really, but I'll go along. I'll watch the movie with you. I'll keep you company. And so, and it's vice versa with her. So there's these points that we didn't have common interests, like she wasn't really in the movies. And that's back then. She was more into the symphony orchestra. She liked the opera and so on. She liked reading books. Truly. And there's a lot of TV shows you can turn into a book. You know that, right? The Steinfeld show, you can turn into a series of books. The Friends show, you can turn into a series of books. Take a season, condense it into a book. Truly. Season 1 is a book. Season 2 is a book. Season 3 is a book. So not everybody has to watch TV. And she would have bought all 8 seasons or 10 seasons of Friends. It's like the Harry Potter. There's how many? Jenna reads all of them. So Jen would have read it. She would have never turned on the TV. She would have just bought the book. She would have bought the book for the Steinfeld show or the Friends show, and then she would have bought the different seasons. So you don't have to have them watch TV. You don't have to have them listen to radio. You can turn those shows into stories too. So if they like books or they like podcasts or they like this. So there's a million different ways to reach an audience. And let people be who they are and what they like. And stop tying me up. Stop trying to govern my life as I don't yours. So if you don't like TV, there are a million fiction books. And if you don't like that, there's CNBC. They can turn seasons of that into a book. And you like reading finance, season 1 of CNBC. Truly, season 49 of CNBC. And we have these, and you read it, the content, and we have these stories from CNBC. The one girl turned it into a book. I forget what the book is, but her guests, she turned into a book. She had these guests over, I think, a couple seasons, and then she condensed it down into a book. I forget the name of the book. But she was a talk show host or an interviewer for one of the financial shows. And then she took each of the guests and put it into a book. I listened to it on Audible. I didn't read it, but I did buy the Audible, just like Miss Park. I read some of the book, and I would have read more of the book. I didn't finish reading the book, but I listened to the whole Audible. So some people want more of the Audible. Some people want both. They'll listen to the Audible and they'll read the book. Truly. Some people like to do both. And so you'll sell them the Audible and you sell them the book. Other people just want one or the other. Some people just want the Cliff Notes. You know you can make Cliff Notes for any book, whether fiction or nonfiction. They call it the secret sauce at the CFA. They take all the books and condense it into one book called the secret sauce. But that's a Cliff Note book. It's the same thing. So you can create a Cliff Note of all 8 seasons of Friends. And somebody would rather read the summary of each season. So chapter 1, season 1. Chapter 2, season 2. And so on. And the book has 10 chapters. Other people want more content. They want more background and what happened behind the scenes and so on and so forth. And these little quirky stories. And that goes into a whole book. Just season 1. It's one separate big book. But other people, they want all the seasons in one book. They just want the Cliff Notes. They want the little pieces of information. They don't want the whole story. So again, these are different ways to structure things. So people can be who they are and you can reach them where they are. So I don't understand. That's like you like pepperoni pizza. Some people like cheese pizza. Other people like sausage. Other people just like veggies. Other people like wheat crust. Other people like white crust. But you're going to have to, like Rosati's, you're going to have to decide who you're going to reach with your pizzas. You can't cater to everybody. But you can cater to a big segment of your audience where you are. And you have to understand what your audience likes. Truly, what the audience likes. So they have to figure out what the audience likes. And in some areas, they might offer certain versions, like McDonald's. My friend John went to McDonald's in Germany. They offered McBeer. They didn't have it in the United States, but in Germany, they offered beer. And it's called McBeer. And it was only offered in Germany. And then there is Bobby, who told me about Pepsi. And Pepsi had this soda that had baobab. And it was only offered in Japan. It was Pepsi with baobab. And it only was offered in Japan. They made it only for the Japanese market. And I don't know the whole market or just a segment of the market. But it was a version of Pepsi that you could only get in Japan. So that way, it's market specific. And if you wanted to get a baobab Pepsi, then you had to fly to Japan. But if you're tourists in Japan, you're like, oh, baobab Pepsi, I'll try that one. But it was only available in Japan, not in the United States, not in Europe or any other market. So you might buy some to go, but you're not going to get any more in the States. They don't distribute it to the States because that would be pilfering on the Pepsis here. They don't want you distributing it in the States. They made it specifically for the Japanese market and the Japanese market only. So that's what I was talking about, but you missed the points. So you can have things that are total general market. They do. The cheeseburger. Like in Pulp Fiction, Royale, cheese something. But the whole thing in France, they call it a different name. It's a cheeseburger. But the whole thing is, it's still the same cheeseburger. So you have the things that are general market. So you don't understand. So there are things that make people come here. And if they want a baobab, you got to go fly to Japan. And the export rules, they might not let you take baobab on the plane. Truly, Pepsi lobbies and tell them you can't export this at all. People can't take it out in the market. So you're not allowed to buy it and take it with you. It's not allowed for export. So the Japanese government, when they inspect things that people are leaving, they're like, nope, you can't take the Pepsi with you. Or you can send it back and you can get a refund or something, but nope, the Pepsi can't leave the market. It's only domestic consumption only. So that's why we have these trade things between states and between counties and between local governments. So some things can't leave a certain area. They're only for Buffalo Grove. And so they can't leave Buffalo Grove, that product, truly. So, and truly you can make it that way because there's these import-export between local governments, interstate commerce and commerce between. So it's the state law that governs commerce between local governments and then county governments. And so they can say these things are for domestic consumption only. And you're not allowed to take them outside the city of Chicago. And if you do, you can get fined. So again, you can set up these rules and you inform people. Now, how you're going to catch them? Well, state troopers and city police can do random inspections too. There are ways to set up things, checks and balances. But maybe they have to have a local ID to buy. Or they have to be staying at a local hotel to buy, and it can only be consumed here. Truly. Like you have food products. Maybe the food products here can't be taken anywhere but this Chinatown. Truly. And if you're not a resident, you can't take the food outside of here. Truly. The food can't leave this Chinatown. It's unique. These dishes are to this Chinatown and this Chinatown only. You can consume in the restaurant or you consume locally in the hotel, but truly, to the airport and that, they forbid it. You can't take the food on the plane. And so, truly, no food can leave the market. So it's for local consumption only. So you can come down here and have it and that, but you can't take it out in the market. So, string. So, again, you can set up things in that way with laws. And there are ways to enforce those laws. So, again, that's why I'm big for legal immigration. So you can get exactly what you want. So we can put people in the right places. And even with educational tourism and that. Certain people, you don't want to go to school in the United States. Even if they can get into Harvard, you don't want them. We don't want educational tourism from Venezuela. I'm just giving you as an example. So you say, we don't, but they can go to Europe or some other country. You're not preventing them from going to school outside their country, but you're saying, we don't accept educational tourism from this country. Or we don't accept you for some reason. But you can say, these countries, perfect alternatives, and you can give a referral. Say there's a boarding school in Switzerland that might be perfect for you. Where my friend, she sent her child overseas to a boarding school in Switzerland. Laura from Mexico sent her child. Her child went to boarding school in Switzerland. Not in Mexico. The child didn't go to school in Mexico. The child went to boarding school in Switzerland for elementary school and high school. A private boarding school in Switzerland. And then I don't know where the child went for college. But again, you can work these things out. Unique Chicago. Truly, unique to Chicago. Only for domestic consumption. Is not allowed outside this market. So that's what I showed you with YouTube videos and everything. You can make them specific to market with Comcast. You can only get certain viewing in Chicago. And then they use other viewing in other markets. So this is just for this specific market. So instead of saying, the Bulls game is general market and no, they can have multiple broadcasters working out of different studios, and they don't have to be there at the game. And they're like, okay, this is for Shanghai, this game. And so we're going to hire these announcers, and they're going to do the game in Chinese, and we're going to send it out to Shanghai. And so you can televise the NBA game to all these countries, and you can have all these different announcer teams. But they work in that market. And so they get a name, they're in that market, they live in that market, per se, or you're using them from here. Like, say maybe you have Koreans here, and you're doing something to South Korea. And so you have, let's give a better thing. You have Judy Sue. She's Chinese, and you're doing something to a Chinese market, but it's produced here. She can be an announcer for the Chicago Bulls game getting broadcast in Shanghai. And Judy Sue from Channel 7 is actually the announcer, and she's doing it in Chinese, as an example. Truly. So she does only the broadcast for the Shanghai market for the Chicago Bulls. And then you have Robbie Bajwal. He's Indian. I don't know if he speaks Hindi. If he speaks Hindi, then you can have Robbie do it. But if not, then Robbie can do it for the Indian market, maybe here in the United States. You want to target, say, Streamwood. I know here you got the local announcers and everything. I'm just giving you an example. And you feel better, it would be an Indian guy doing it, targeting an Indian population. Not always. Truly. Sometimes the opposite race is perfect. But I'm just saying, maybe you found something and you want to do it. But maybe Robbie speaks Hindi and you want to market the Chicago Bulls to New Delhi. And so Robbie does the broadcast in Hindi for New Delhi. And they see the picture of Robbie and everything, and they market with billboards, the Chicago Bulls, Robbie Bajwal in New Delhi. Truly. And you put it on local television and that. And every so often, Robbie flies to New Delhi. Truly. He flies there. He shows up, and there's a meet and greet. Robbie Bajwal will be in New Delhi for this week. And he's doing, meet and greets, and he's going to talk on being an Indian announcer for the NBA and how he likes working and announcing for the Chicago Bulls in India. In the United States to the Indian market. And so he's talking about this. And so Robbie Bajwal is talking about that, and he's talking in Hindi. He's over there, and he goes maybe twice a year. Truly, obligation. Every 6 months, he takes a trip over there for a week or two for meet and greets. And he goes around to the different universities or centers and does speeches and talks about the NBA. Truly, talking about the NBA and everything. And you don't have to have paid for tickets. This is promotion. So you offer free food and drink and that. And free attendance, free food and drink. Come see Robbie. Truly, it's a promotional, so everything is getting up butts in the seat. You want them to make friends. It's not about generating revenue directly. It's generated indirectly. More people watching the TV and so on. More people looking at the Bulls on the internet and so on. And so they're getting butts in the seat and selling commercials, and then they have the stuff during the game. Robbie talks about, our sponsor, 7-Eleven, or truly, there's a new 7-Eleven opening up in blank section of New Delhi. The grand opening will be blank, blank, thanks to our sponsor, 7-Eleven. A lot of Indians own 7-Elevens from India. They also own Dunkin' Donuts and so on. But again, I'm just giving you examples. There's Michelle Rutherford. Ghana speaks all English. I don't know if she's Ghanaian, but she's black. And Ghana speaks all English. And She could do the Chicago Bulls telecast to Ghana. Truly, I'm talking for Chicago. They can do their thing in New York, LA, and so on. And so Michelle is doing the Chicago Bulls broadcast to, or maybe she's doing the women's team, the Sky. And she's broadcasting it in Ghana. And Michelle flies over there and meets up with women's groups. She hooks up with different churches in Ghana. Truly, churches. And she's focused on meet and greet, talking about, being an announcer and for the Chicago Bulls telecast in Ghana. And, she goes over there, she meets with women's groups, and maybe through the church you set it up with in Ghana. And she's directly focusing on women and getting their attention into the women's NBA and so on. And so using your talent base correctly. So we have the Hawks. We might have some Russians. You can telecast the Blackhawks in Russia. I don't know who's Russian here that could do the telecast that you can build around in Russia. So you promote it. The Hawks games are going to be the NHL being telecast, the Chicago Blackhawks into Russia, into Sweden, and so on. They have their own local teams, but you can also get an international audience. And so somebody's doing it in Sweden, and they talk in Swedish. Truly, there's a Swedish Chamber of Commerce. And you can get somebody who has good ties to Sweden, and hopefully they have public speaking. You should be able to find somebody that has good public speaking, and they're now televising the Chicago Blackhawks in Sweden, as an example. So, again, you find somebody and they can reach out the Blackhawk game here, and truly, they can do it all from Chicago. They don't have to travel with the team. And so they do play-by-play. Their cameras are on 24/7. It's unlike the ones on the TV where it cuts away and of that. They have full access to the cameras. 20 all on, all non-edited per se. And it shows them when the green light comes on, they're back on the air. The red light, they're off the air. And then they're talking and gathering data and so on. And then they get back on the air. Welcome back to the Chicago Blackhawks in Chicago. Thank you, you Swedish. We love Sweden. And so on and so forth. This is your host, Joe Blank. But he's doing it in Swedish. And so on and so forth. And there's our sponsor, IKEA. And we like to say thank you to our sponsor sponsoring the Chicago Blackhawks telecast in Sweden. We like to say thanks to IKEA. So, I don't know, but you can do this and you use the local talent, and some things will have a very small market, might not get much traction. Other things will come popular. So you can see how much, and they can just do rebroadcasts, and it's up there for like podcasts, and somebody watches it, then there's commercials built into it and that. And so you get it on the residuals, not the live, but they watch it on the backside, or they see clips on YouTube, and it's, say Robbie Bagewell clips for the Chicago Bulls broadcast in the New Delhi, and he does clips and he puts it up there for the New Delhi audience only. And they get these segments of the score, the Bulls win. So, again, use your talents. So, there's Erica. She's a lighter-skinned black. So, I think she might be mulatto. I don't know, but it seems. So, Michelle's darker. Erica's lighter. So, maybe South Africa. I don't know where there's more interracial marriages, but she'll appeal to a certain audience in Africa, or maybe in France, truly in France. And so you want to telecast the Chicago White Sox to France. And so I'm just giving you examples, and you're trying to blend that person, that face, that friendly look into that market. And she's, she works for CBS, and she's there. You have the older black guy, and, he doesn't, so I don't know exactly the demographics, but again, you're figuring out the demographics and placing these people in these places, and they'll have engineers and other people that have to work with them in the studio. Truly. They'll have a producer and an engineer and so on. So there'll be all kinds of support casts. So there's jobs for many others. So again, these things can be worked out. So again, I'm talking here in Chicago, but these things can be worked out. So here's women in energy, like Dan's wife. She's a woman in energy. So again, the Chicago Hotel and so on. So I'm going to leave this here. I'll post it on YouTube. But if you're listening to it, you're probably on YouTube then. But anyways, just some thoughts on how to make these things work, how to reach the audience. And they can do it back to Sweden's audiences here. Truly, the Swedish hockey professional team, they can market into the United States, into the Swedish population. It's trade. You can go there, they can come here, and, they might not find much interest, or they might find a lot of interest for European hockey. I don't know. But the whole point is, people are free to like what they want and don't like what they want. So again, we can figure these things out.